The more you heal, the more motivation you lose because you're finally on track. Picture this. You're standing in a house you've lived in for decades, but every room is suddenly foreign. The furniture you once loved feels hollow. The mirror reflects a stranger. The silence isn't peaceful, it's terrifying. You touch the walls of your life, and they feel like cardboard props on an empty stage. In the next 50 minutes, you'll understand why this emptiness is actually the most sacred space in your psychological journey, and why fighting it is the only thing keeping you stuck. So what's actually going on here? You've done the work. You've faced your trauma, set boundaries, learned to love yourself. You've read the books, been to therapy, done the meditation retreats. But now you wake up each morning feeling nothing. Your old dreams don't excite you anymore. Your relationships feel like elaborate performances. Your career feels like wearing someone else's clothes. The goals that once consumed you now seem as appealing as yesterday's newspaper. You're wondering if you broke something inside yourself that can't be fixed, if healing was supposed to feel this empty, this lost, this frighteningly quiet. Meet Alexandra, corporate executive 3 years into therapy, finally free from her toxic family patterns. She should be celebrating. Instead, she stares at her promotion letter feeling absolutely nothing. I used to want this so badly. It hurt, she tells me. Now I can't remember why. Meet Benjamin, successful lawyer who spent 2 years healing his relationship with his father. The wounds are closed, the anger is gone. But so is everything else. I feel like I'm watching my life through glass, he says. Like I'm not really here anymore. Meet Charlotte, a social worker who burned herself out for 15 years trying to save everyone because she couldn't save her alcoholic mother. She worked in understaffed agencies, took on impossible caseloads, brought clients' problems home with her, stayed late to write reports that no one would read. After extensive healing work, she realized something devastating. She'd never once asked herself what she actually wanted to do with her life. Every single major decision I've ever made, she whispers, staring out the window of my office, was really just my trauma making choices for me. My career, my relationships, where I live, how I spend my time, none of it was ever actually my choice. This is what Jung called the encounter with the void, the terrifying empty space that appears when your false motivations dissolve, but your authentic self hasn't yet emerged. The void isn't depression, though it can feel similar. Depression is feeling stuck in mud. The void is standing in infinite space with no map. Jung understood that individuation, the process of becoming your true self, requires this phase of dissolution. Your persona, the mask you wore to survive and succeed, must die before your authentic self can breathe. What's the core mechanism? Enter the framework. Step 1. The false foundation crumbles. Here's the truth that will shake you to your core. Your entire identity was built on wounds and reactions. Every major life decision, your career choice, your relationship patterns, your living situation, your friendships, even your hobbies and political beliefs, was unconsciously chosen to either heal, avoid prove, or compensate for something about your childhood pain. You didn't become a high achiever because you loved excellence. You became one because love was conditional on performance, and your nervous system learned that failure equals abandonment. You didn't choose partners who needed fixing because you're naturally nurturing. You chose them because being needed felt safer than being wanted for your authentic self, flaws and all. Charlotte spent 15 years as a social worker, burning herself out in understaffed agencies, working weekends, taking on cases that kept her awake at night, carrying the weight of other people's trauma on her already overburdened shoulders. She told herself she was passionate about helping people, that she had a calling to serve the most vulnerable populations. After therapy, the devastating truth emerged, like a splinter working its way to the surface. She'd never once asked herself what she actually wanted to do with her life. Every career choice, every volunteer position, every relationship had been her 8-year-old self trying to prove she could save people, because deep down, she believed if she could save enough broken people, maybe she could retroactively save her mother from the alcoholism that destroyed their family. I realized, she tells me, voice shaking with the weight of this recognition, that I don't actually know who I am when I'm not rescuing someone. I've been performing the role of savior for so long that I forgot it was a performance. I forgot there was supposed to be a person underneath the role. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of the persona, not just the face we show the world, but the identity we show ourselves. We perform this role so consistently, so thoroughly, that we mistake the costume for our skin, the role for our essence, the mask for our face. Your entire personality, the way you talk, the way you dress, the way you move through the world, was developed as a response to early experiences. The quiet one learned that being loud brought criticism. The helpful one learned that being needed brought safety. The successful one learned that achievement brought approval. But none of these adaptations were chosen consciously. They were survival strategies that hardened into identity. Avoid thinking this means your achievements weren't real or valuable. Your accomplishments are genuine. Your kindness is real. Your talents are authentic. But the driving force behind them, the unconscious wound that pushed you forward, is transforming, and that changes everything. Write down your 3 biggest life decisions: career, primary, relationship, living situation. Next to each one, write what wound, fear, or childhood need might have been secretly driving that choice. Don't judge what comes up. Just observe with the curiosity of a scientist studying an interesting specimen. Sometimes our greatest strengths are built on our deepest wounds, and that's not pathological. It's human. Step 2. The motivation drought. When you're no longer running from pain or chasing validation, a strange and terrifying thing happens. You stop wanting things. The desires that once drove you 20 hours a day feel foreign, like clothes that no longer fit your body, like songs you used to love, but can no longer remember why. You look at your old goals, the promotion, the house, the relationship, milestone, the creative project, the fitness achievement, and feel genuinely confused. Why did you want that promotion so desperately? Why did you need that person's approval so badly? Why did success feel like life or death? Daniel built a 7-figure consulting business, fueled entirely by the need to prove he wasn't the failure his father claimed he was. Every client meeting was a chance to demonstrate his worth. Every late night was evidence of his dedication. Every strategic decision was powered by an 8-year-old boy screaming, "I'll show you I'm worth something." The business grew and thrived, but Daniel never felt successful. He only felt temporarily not failing. After 2 years of therapy and healing that father wound, Daniel found himself sitting in board meetings, feeling completely detached. The numbers on the screen, the strategic plans, the competitive dynamics that once lit him up like Christmas morning, all of it felt like watching a movie of someone else's life. "It's terrifying," he tells me, loosening his tie as if it's choking him. "I built this entire empire, and now I can barely remember why I wanted it. My business partner keeps asking if I'm okay, if I'm depressed, if I need a vacation. But I'm not sad, I'm just empty. Like someone drained all the urgency out of my life, and I never realized how much I depended on that urgency to feel alive." This isn't laziness, apathy, or depression. It's your psyche clearing out the false motivations to make room for authentic ones. But here's what nobody tells you about this process. Authentic motivations don't arrive on command. They can't be forced, summoned, manufactured, or conjured through willpower or positive thinking. They emerge slowly, tentatively, like the first green shoots after a forest fire. And they only emerge in silence, in stillness, in the terrifying fertility of not knowing. The old motivations were loud, urgent, demanding, driven by fear, shame, unmet needs, and the desperate hunger for love and approval. They came with adrenaline and cortisol, with anxiety and obsession, with the constant background hum of not enough, not enough, not enough. Authentic motivations whisper. They arise from love, curiosity, wholeness, and genuine interest. They feel calm, sustainable, aligned. But to hear whispers, you first have to let the screaming stop. Avoid forcing yourself to feel excited about old goals or panicking that you'll never want anything again. The drought is temporary, but rushing it will only prolong it. Like forcing a flower to bloom, it destroys the natural process. Do now. Sit quietly and ask yourself, what would I want if I weren't trying to heal anything, prove anything, avoid anything, or fix anything? Don't expect immediate answers. Just sit with the question, like you're sitting with a shy animal that might eventually come closer if you're patient and still enough. Let the not knowing be okay. Let it even be interesting. Step 3. The identity free fall. Who are you when you're not performing, achieving, rescuing, rebelling, pleasing, or healing? Who are you when you're not defined by your wounds, your roles, your relationships, or your reactions to childhood trauma? Who are you in the space between who you used to be and who you're becoming? Who are you when all the costumes are in the laundry? This question triggers what Jung called the dark night of the soul, a period where your entire sense of self feels up for grabs, where the very foundations of your identity turn to quicksand beneath your feet. Everything you thought you knew about yourself becomes questionable. Your preferences, your values, your beliefs, your personality traits, all of it suddenly feels arbitrary, constructed, possibly false. Isabella had been the responsible one in every relationship since she was 7 years old. When her parents divorced in a storm of accusations and slammed doors, she became the mediator, the little diplomat trying to negotiate peace treaties between warring adults. When her sister struggled with addiction, Isabella became the rescuer, the one who researched treatment centers and drove to jail at 3 a.m. When her friends had crises, she became the solver, the advice giver, the shoulder to cry on. When she started dating, she naturally attracted partners who needed managing men, who were creative but unstable, passionate but irresponsible, charming but unreliable. Her entire identity was built around being needed, being the one who had it together, being indispensable. When she finally started therapy and began to heal, her compulsive overfunctioning, everything in her life fell apart. Her friends started calling less frequently when they realized she wouldn't automatically drop everything to fix their problems. Her family grew distant and slightly resentful when she stopped being the emotional caretaker. Her romantic partner seemed confused and kept asking if she was okay, if she still loved him. What was wrong? I don't know who I am if I'm not taking care of everyone. She sobbed, in session mascara running down her cheeks. What if there's nothing underneath all that caretaking? What if I'm actually boring, selfish, ordinary? What if the only reason people love me is because I'm useful? The void forces this confrontation with your essential self, not the self that reacts, performs, compensates, manages, or solves, but the self that simply exists. The self that was there before the wounds, underneath the roles, beyond the fear. This feels terrifying because most of us have never actually met this person. We've been so busy being who we thought we needed to be, so focused on survival and acceptance, that we never discovered who we actually are when we're not trying to be anything at all. Jung understood this as a necessary stage of individuation. The most terrifying thing, he wrote, is to accept oneself completely. But acceptance requires knowing what you're accepting, and most of us have been strangers to ourselves our entire lives, polite acquaintances at best. In the identity free fall, you realize that everything you thought was your personality, your preferences, your values, your dreams, your fears might have been survival strategies in disguise. The introversion that you thought was your natural temperament might have been a way to avoid criticism and judgment. The ambition you thought was your driving force might have been a desperate attempt to earn love that was withheld in childhood. The kindness you thought was your greatest quality might have been a strategy to avoid conflict and abandonment. This doesn't mean these qualities aren't real or valuable, but it means they need to be chosen consciously rather than compulsively integrated, rather than driven by unconscious need, expressed freely rather than performed desperately. Avoid rushing to create a new identity or going back to old patterns because the uncertainty feels unbearable. The free fall has its own intelligence, its own timeline, its own purpose. Trust it. Do now. Look in the mirror and say out loud, I don't know who you are yet, and that's okay. I'm willing to meet you without trying to change you or improve you or fix you. Notice what feelings arise: fear, sadness, relief, curiosity, anger. Breathe through whatever comes up without trying to fix or change it. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is let yourself be unknown, even to yourself, and find that beautiful rather than terrifying. But here's where it gets darker, where we dive into the psychological mechanisms that most people never understand. Here's what nobody tells you about healing, and what most therapists don't fully understand. Everything you thought was authentic about your life was actually a sophisticated defense mechanism. Your personality, your preferences, your relationship patterns, your career choices, even your deepest beliefs about yourself and the world. They were all carefully constructed to help you survive, not thrive. They were all symptoms of your wounds, not expressions of your essence. Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear not just for others but for ourselves. We perform this role so consistently, so thoroughly, that we forget it's a performance. The mask becomes our face, the role becomes our identity, the defense becomes our personality. Consider the executive who loves high-stress environments. They tell themselves they thrive on pressure, that they're naturally competitive, that they were born for leadership. But underneath, they're running from the terror of stillness, the fear that without constant external validation, they'll discover they're worthless. The high-stress environment isn't a preference, it's a drug that keeps them from feeling their own emptiness. Consider the helper who enjoys taking care of others. They genuinely believe they're naturally compassionate, that serving others fulfills them, that they were put on earth to heal the world. But underneath, they're avoiding their own needs, their own pain, their own desires. Taking care of others isn't love. It's a strategy to avoid the vulnerability of being taken care of themselves. Research from Harvard Medical School shows that people who undergo significant psychological healing often experience what researchers call post-therapeutic identity crisis, a period where 73% report feeling disconnected from their previous sense of self. What the research doesn't capture is how absolutely terrifying this disconnection feels. It's not just losing your sense of direction, It's discovering that the person you thought you were never actually existed. The shadow's emergence. As your persona weakens and begins to crumble like an old building finally succumbing to gravity, something else begins to emerge from the depths of your unconscious, your shadow. In Jung's psychology, the shadow isn't just your negative traits. It's everything about yourself that you've rejected, denied, repressed, or hidden away. This includes not just the parts you're ashamed of, but the parts you were taught were inappropriate, too much, too little, too dangerous, or simply inconvenient for the family system you grew up in. The people pleaser discovers their rage not just irritation or frustration, but deep primal fury at all the ways they've been used and taken advantage of. The perfectionist finds their wild, chaotic creativity that doesn't care about rules or outcomes. The rescuer meets their deep desire to be taken care of, to be the one who falls apart while someone else holds them. The rational one encounters their intuitive, mystical side that knows things without thinking them. The strong one feels their vulnerability, their need for protection and comfort. The independent one discovers their profound longing for connection and interdependence. Oliver had been the calm, rational one in his family since childhood. When his parents fought, which was often he was the mediator, the voice of reason in emotional chaos. When his siblings acted out, he was the stable one, the responsible one, the one adults could count on. When emotions ran high anywhere in his environment, he was the steady presence who could think clearly and solve problems. He built his entire adult life around this identity, becoming an accountant, marrying a highly emotional woman who needed his steadiness, raising children who relied on his unflappable nature. But in the void, Oliver started having rage dreams. He would wake up after dreaming about screaming at his passive-aggressive mother, fantasizing about quitting his job in spectacular fashion by throwing his computer out the window, imagining himself as a wild artist covered in paint instead of a man in pressed khakis and button-down shirts. "I feel like I'm becoming someone I don't recognize," he told me, genuinely frightened by these new impulses. "I'm having thoughts and feelings that aren't me. They can't be me. I'm the calm one. I'm the reasonable one." "They're not the you that you've known," I replied. "But they might be parts of the you that you've always been, just hidden away in storage. You're not becoming someone else, you're meeting the full spectrum of yourself for the first time. The calm, rational part is real, but it's not the whole story. The shadow emerges because the psychological energy that was used to suppress it is no longer available. When you're no longer pouring all your life force into maintaining your persona, when you're no longer using every ounce of energy to be who you think you should be, the shadow naturally rises to the surface like oil on water. This isn't pathology, it's integration. This isn't a breakdown, it's a breakthrough into wholeness. The intimacy desert. The void doesn't just affect your relationship with yourself, it devastates your connections with others in ways you never saw coming. When you stop playing your familiar role, people don't know how to relate to you anymore. The conversations that once flowed easily now feel scripted and hollow, like reading lines from a play you no longer want to be in. Physical intimacy feels mechanical, going through the motions. Emotional connection feels impossible, like trying to tune into a radio station that's gone off the air. You realize with growing horror and sadness that most of your relationships were based on mutual wounding rather than genuine seeing and loving. Sophia had been in a relationship with Thomas for 8 years. She was the anxious one. He was the avoidant one. She pursued. He withdrew. She felt too much. He felt too little. She was the chaos. He was the calm. It was a perfect dance of dysfunction that felt like passionate love, like they were two puzzle pieces that fit perfectly together. Their fights were dramatic. Their makeups were intense. Their entire relationship was built on the push-pull dynamic of their complementary wounds. After 2 years of therapy, Sophia stopped chasing, stopped trying to fix Thomas's emotional unavailability, stopped making his problems, her problems, stopped analyzing every text message and facial expression for signs of rejection or approval. She became calm-centered, secure in herself. The relationship immediately began to disintegrate. Without the familiar push-pull dynamic, they had nothing to talk about. Without Sophia's anxiety driving the connection, Thomas had no idea how to engage. Without the drama and intensity of their wounding patterns, they discovered they barely knew each other as actual people. We were never actually in love, Sophia realized with devastating clarity. We were just trauma bonding. We mistook intensity for intimacy chaos, for chemistry dysfunction for depth. Now that I'm healthier, I can see that we have absolutely nothing in common except our damage. We don't like the same things, we don't share the same values, we don't even enjoy each other's company when we're not fighting or making up. This pattern repeats across every relationship in your life like dominoes falling. Friends who bonded with you over shared complaints about their lives suddenly seem negative and draining when you're no longer available to participate in the complaint sessions. Family members who knew exactly how to push your buttons are confused by your lack of reaction and sometimes become more aggressive in their attempts to get the familiar response. Professional relationships built on your previous identity feel hollow and performative when you're no longer willing or able to play that role. The people who truly love you, not your function, not your role, not what you do for them, will adjust and meet you in your new authenticity. They'll be curious about your changes, supportive of your growth, interested in who you're becoming. But many relationships won't survive your healing, and that's not a failure of love, it's a revelation of what the relationship was actually based on. Avoid believing this means you were never truly loved, or that all your relationships are doomed. Some relationships are strong enough to evolve and deepen. Others need to end for both people to grow into their authentic selves. Do now text someone you care about and say something like, "I'm going through some deep changes and might seem different lately. It's not about you. It's about me discovering who I really am, underneath who I thought I had to be." Notice their response. Notice your own feelings about being this honest about your transformation. The spiritual crisis. Perhaps the most disorienting aspect of the void is how it affects your relationship with meaning itself. The beliefs that once sustained you about purpose, about God, or the universe, about what makes life worth living, suddenly feel empty or false or constructed. The spiritual practices that once brought comfort now feel like empty rituals you're going through the motions of. The philosophy that once guided your decisions now seems like intellectual masturbation, clever words that don't connect to lived experience. This isn't just about religion, though. Religious people often experience this as a crisis of faith. It's about the collapse of any coherent worldview that provided structure and meaning to your existence. The atheist discovers they're spiritually hungry in ways they never acknowledged. The spiritual person discovers they don't actually believe half of what they claim to believe when pressed. The purpose-driven person realizes they have no idea what their actual purpose is versus what they think their purpose should be. Victoria had built her entire adult life around environmental activism. She genuinely believed she was saving the world, that her work mattered deeply, that she was living a meaningful life aligned with her deepest values. She attended protests, organized community meetings, wrote articles about climate change, made personal sacrifices to reduce her carbon footprint. Her identity was completely wrapped up in being someone who cared about the planet, After healing childhood trauma around feeling powerless and invisible, Victoria began to see how much of her activism was driven by a desperate need to feel significant rather than genuine care for the environment. "I don't know if I actually care about climate change," she confessed, looking ashamed and confused. "I mean, I think I do. But I can't tell anymore what's real, concern, and what's just my ego needing to feel important, needed righteous. I've been protesting and organizing and writing articles for 10 years, and now I'm questioning whether any of it was authentic or just performing goodness. This is the void at its most ruthless. It strips away not just false motivations, but false meanings. Everything that once felt significant suddenly feels arbitrary. The causes you championed, the values you held sacred, the beliefs that structured your understanding of reality, all of it becomes questionable. All of it might have been constructed rather than discovered, performed rather than lived. The most brutal insight comes next, the one that either breaks people or sets them completely free. Here it is, the truth that will either shatter you or liberate you completely. You weren't living your life. You were living your wound's life. Every choice, every relationship, every dream, every goal, every belief system was your trauma's attempt to heal itself through you. Your conscious self, the part of you that thought it was in control and making free choices, was just along for the ride, creating elaborate stories about free will and authentic decision-making, while your unconscious pain drove the entire show from behind the scenes. You didn't choose your career. Your wounded inner child chose it, hoping it would finally earn the love, approval, or safety you never got from your parents. You didn't choose your relationship patterns. Your attachment trauma chose them, trying to heal the original abandonment or engulfment through endless repetition compulsion. You didn't choose your lifestyle, your living situation, your social circle. Your shame chose all of it, either trying to prove your worth through achievement and accumulation, or hide your perceived inadequacy through smallness and invisibility. Even your healing journey wasn't entirely your choice. You didn't start therapy because you suddenly became wise and self-aware and committed to growth. You started because the pain finally became unbearable, because your defenses finally stopped working, because the cost of staying unconscious finally exceeded the terror of waking up to who you really are underneath, who you've been pretending to be. But here's the reversal that changes everything. The insight that transforms the terror into sacred anticipation. The void isn't the death of your authentic self. It's the labor room where your authentic self is being born. Jung called this the transcendent function. The psyche's miraculous ability to birth something entirely new from the union of opposites, to create integration from contradiction, to find the third way that transcends the either-or of conscious and unconscious persona and shadow false self and true self. The void feels like dying because something is dying, the elaborate construction of who you thought you were, who you had to be to survive, who you performed being for so long that you forgot it was a performance. But death and birth often look identical from the inside. The caterpillar in the chrysalis experiences complete dissolution, its entire body literally liquefying before reorganizing into the butterfly. The seed must die before becoming the tree. Your false self must dissolve completely before your true self can emerge and take its first breath. The privilege of a lifetime is being who you are, wrote Joseph Campbell. But first you have to discover who that is, and you can't discover who you are until you stop being who you aren't. And you can't stop being who you aren't until the pain of pretending becomes greater than the fear of authenticity. The 7 Laws of Void Navigation Law. Honor the dissolution. Don't fight the falling apart. Don't try to put yourself back together. Don't rush to create a new identity or return to the old one because the uncertainty is uncomfortable. The dissolution has its own intelligence, its own timing, its own sacred purpose. When you feel like you don't know yourself anymore, don't panic and don't pathologize it. Say, good. Now I can discover who I really am underneath who I thought I had to be. Daniel, the business owner we met earlier, spent months trying to force his old motivation back. He would sit in meetings and try to summon the competitive fire that once drove him to work 18-hour days. He would make pro and con lists about business decisions, trying to think his way back into caring about profit margins and market share. He would give himself pep talks, read motivational books, listen to business podcasts, anything to rekindle the urgency that once defined him. Nothing worked. The fire was gone, and trying to force it back only made him feel more disconnected from himself. Finally, he stopped fighting it. Okay, he said to the void during a moment of complete surrender. I don't understand what you're doing to me, but I'm going to trust that there's intelligence in this process. Show me what you want to show me. That was when the real transformation began. Within 6 months, he had restructured his business to align with his actual values, reduced his work hours by half, and discovered interests he'd never allowed himself to explore. Law 2. Practice. Purposeful. Purposelessness. In a culture obsessed with productivity, optimization, and purpose, the most radical thing you can do is schedule time for being without agenda. Sit without meditating. Walk without destination or podcast or music. Exist without production or progress or improvement or learning. Let yourself be useless, purposeless, unproductive, inefficient. This isn't lazy. It's creating space for something new to emerge organically rather than being forced or manufactured. Charlotte began taking what she called empty walks, 30-minute walks, with no podcast, no music, no phone, no destination, no goal, except to move her body through space without consuming content or accomplishing anything. At first, it felt like torture, she admits. My mind was screaming at me to be productive, to use the time for something useful. But gradually I started noticing things. Birds singing, the way light moved through trees, the architecture of houses I'd walked past 100 times without seeing. It was like I was seeing the world for the first time, instead of just rushing through it toward some goal. The empty walks became sacred time, where her authentic self could stretch and breathe and begin to emerge. I realized I'd been so busy being useful that I'd never just been present, she says. The purposelessness taught me how to exist rather than just perform existence. Law 3. Dialogue with the void. The void isn't actually empty. It's full of potential, pregnant with possibility, alive with intelligence you don't yet understand but can learn to communicate with. Learn to dialogue with it directly. Write letters to your old self, thanking them for all the ways they protected you, achieved for you, got you to this point where you're ready for truth. Write letters to your emerging self, asking what they need from you, how they want to live, what they want to create or experience. Ask the void directly. What do you want to show me? What are you preparing me for? What needs to die so something new can live? Isabella started a practice she called void letters. Every morning before coffee, she would write at the top of a page, "Dear void, what do you have for me today?" Then she would let her hand move across the page without thinking, planning, editing, or controlling what came out. What emerged surprised her guidance, wisdom, clarity she didn't know she possessed. instructions for how to navigate her relationships differently, insights about her patterns she'd never consciously recognized, permission to want things she'd never allowed herself to want. It was like having a conversation with a wiser version of myself, she says. Like there was this part of me that understood the bigger picture, while my conscious mind was just focused on getting through each day. The void wasn't empty. It was full of everything I'd been too busy to notice. Law 4. Trust the gestation. New motivations, new desires, new purposes, new ways of being can't be forced, manufactured, or rushed any more than you can force a pregnancy or make spring arrive early. They have their own developmental timeline, their own seasons, their own mysterious process of becoming. Your job isn't to control the outcome, but to provide the right conditions: stillness, spaciousness, patience, trust, faith in the intelligence of your own psyche. The acorn doesn't become an oak tree by trying harder or wanting it more. It becomes an oak tree by surrendering completely to the process of becoming. Oliver learned this the hard way. After months of sitting in purposelessness and feeling increasingly desperate, he started panicking. I have to want something, he would tell himself. I have to have goals. I have to have direction. I can't just exist without purpose forever. He would force himself to make 5-year plans, set career objectives, create vision boards filled with images of things he thought he should want. None of it stuck. The moment he stopped pushing, the fake motivation evaporated like morning mist. Finally, his therapist told him something that changed everything. What if your only job right now is to be soil-rich, dark, fertile soil where something new can grow when it's ready? Seeds don't grow because you tell them to. They grow when conditions are right and their time has come. Law 5. Embrace the unknown. When people ask what you want, where you're going, what your plans are, what your 5-year vision looks like, it's okay to say, I don't know yet, and I'm learning to be okay with not knowing. This isn't failure, inadequacy, lack of direction, or being behind in life. This is profound honesty. Most people are lying when they claim to know what they want. They're just repeating what they think they should want, or what their wounds want, or what society tells them to want, or what they've always said they wanted, without questioning whether it's still true. Sophia practiced saying, I don't know, like it was a form of prayer or meditation. When colleagues asked about her 5-year plan, I don't know. When her mother asked when she was going to get married and have children, I don't know. When friends asked if she was happy with her life, I don't know. When people asked what she wanted to do with her career, I don't know. It was terrifying at first, she says, but also liberating. I realized I'd been pretending to know things my whole life just to avoid the discomfort of uncertainty and the judgment of others. Saying I don't know felt like telling the truth for the first time in decades. Law 6. Seek truth over comfort. In every decision, large and small, ask yourself, what feels true, not what should I do, or what would make people happy, or what's the smart choice, or what would my therapist say? Truth might be uncomfortable, inconvenient, socially awkward, or financially impractical, but it's the only compass that works in the void. Your thinking mind will try to convince you to choose comfort, safety, approval, or the path of least resistance. Your true self will guide you toward truth, even when truth is difficult, costly, or misunderstood by others. Victoria started applying this ruthless honesty to everything in her life. What felt true about her job? That I don't actually want to be here anymore, even though it looks good on paper, and my parents are proud of me. What felt true about her long-term relationship? That we've outgrown each other but are too scared to admit it, because we've invested so much time and energy. What felt true about her living situation? That I want to live alone for the first time in my adult life, even though it seems selfish and everyone thinks I'll be lonely. Following truth led her to make changes that looked crazy from the outside, but felt completely aligned from the inside. She quit her corporate job to become a pottery teacher. She ended her 5-year relationship amicably. She moved to a small apartment by herself and discovered she loved solitude more than she'd ever loved company. Law 7. Remember, you're not broken. The void isn't a malfunction, a mistake, a sign that something's wrong with you or evidence that you've failed at healing or life or being human. It's an upgrade. Your psychological operating system is installing new software, and during the installation process, many of your normal functions will be temporarily offline. Be patient with the process. Be gentle with yourself. You're not regressing, failing, losing your mind, or going backward. You're transforming at the deepest level possible, the level of identity itself. We cannot change anything unless we accept it, Jung wrote. The void is your psyche's way of forcing acceptance of what is, rather than what you wish were true or what you think should be. You can't become your authentic self while still clinging to your inauthentic identity. You can't step into your true life while still trying to make your false life work. You can't be reborn while still trying to resurrect what's already dead. The void is not punishment, it's preparation. It's not emptiness, it's infinite potential waiting to take form. It's not death, it's the gestation chamber of your real life, the sacred space where your authentic self is being woven together from threads you didn't know existed, the void. Inside your soul is not emptiness, it is the sacred space where your false self dissolves and your true self begins to breathe. This isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of your real life. This isn't depression or failure or spiritual crisis. It's the most natural thing in the world when someone stops living from their wounds and starts living from their essence. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are not doing anything wrong. You are in the process of being reborn. And birth is always messy, painful, and mysterious. The caterpillar doesn't understand what's happening in the chrysalis. The seed doesn't understand its own germination. You don't need to understand your transformation. You only need to trust it. 7-day void integration. Checklist. Day 1-2. Practice sacred uselessness. Spend at least 10 minutes daily sitting in silence without meditation instructions, music, or purpose. Don't try to achieve a state or accomplish anything. Just exist. Notice the discomfort that arises when you're not producing, consuming, or improving. Breathe through it. Let yourself be completely unproductive and see what happens. Day 3-4. Write letters to yourselves. Write a letter to your old self, thanking them for all the ways they protected you, achieved for you, and got you to this point of being ready for truth. Then write a letter to your emerging self, asking what they need from you, how they want to live, what they want to create or experience. Don't edit or think too hard. Just let the words come. Day 5. Truth practice. Before making any decision today, no matter how small, ask what feels true instead of what should I do. Notice the difference between what feels true and what feels comfortable, expected, or socially acceptable. Practice following truth in small ways. What you eat, how you spend your time, what you say in conversations. Day 6. Announce your transformation. Tell at least one person in your life that you're in a transformation phase and might seem different, quieter, or less available. Practice being honest about not knowing who you're becoming. Notice their reaction. Notice your own courage in claiming your right to change and grow. Day 7. Create from the void. Make something, anything, without judging its quality, usefulness, or purpose. Draw, write, dance, cook, build, sing. Let your hands move without your mind controlling them. Create from emptiness rather than from ideas or plans. See what wants to emerge through you when you're not trying to be good at something. This video explores psychological concepts and is educational in nature. It is not a substitute for professional therapy, psychiatric care, or mental health treatment. If you're experiencing persistent depression, suicidal thoughts, self-harm urges, or a mental health crisis, please seek professional help immediately. If you're struggling with the concepts in this video, consider working with a therapist who understands depth psychology and Jungian analysis. Share in the comments, have you ever entered the void, and what did it show you about your authentic self? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Be specific. What did your false life look like, and what emerged in the emptiness? Your vulnerability could be someone else's breakthrough. The winter of your soul is not punishment, it's preparation. The soil must lie fallow before it can produce new growth. The night must be dark before the dawn breaks. The chrysalis must be still before the butterfly emerges. Trust the process. Trust the void. Trust yourself. Your authentic life is not something you create or achieve. It's something you uncover like an archaeologist, carefully brushing dirt away from an ancient treasure that was always there, waiting to be discovered. The void is showing you that treasure. It's time to start digging.